We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
In 2008, director Steven Spielberg and star Harrison Ford gave the world a flat reboot of a storied franchise.
In 2024, we try a whiskey we know absolutely nothing about.
The film is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
The whiskey is Watershed Pinot Noir finished bourbon.
Did you just say quinoa noir?
No, I said Pinot Noir.
Quinoa noir.
Grainy.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Quinoa G.
Yeah, it's a good day for nicknames, man. Indiana Jones, Quinoa G.
I'm ready, man.
Quinoa G sounds like the worst 90s rapper of all time.
I can't even deny it. That's pretty rough, man.
And today we're watching 2008's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, Brad, coming off of last week's movie Transformers, which has a lot of overlap with this movie, Transformers produced by Steven Spielberg, this movie directed by Steven Spielberg, both co-starring Shia LaBeouf. We talked last week about how happy we were that the title Transformers was just Transformers and that it had no extraneous words.
And they made up for it this week, my friend.
What's the kingdom here? Why are we not just calling it Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull? Like, what a freaking dope name that would be. What are we doing here?
I think that raises my final score on this by a point at least.
Or just cut it off at Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of. That's it.
Kingdom of what? It's a mystery.
We have to go see the movie now. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, dude, we should be in marketing. That would be a heck of a movie poster. Like, remember back in the day when you'd walk in the movies and all the posters would be outside?
Yes.
If like an early poster would just be Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of. ...
Brad, do you not think they put posters outside of the movie theater anymore?
I don't go to the movies.
Yeah, I know. And that's what qualifies you to host this movie-related podcast.
You're welcome, America. I know you don't watch movies either.
Folks, welcome into the show. If this is your first time joining us with Film and Whiskey, we want to say hi, hello. Thanks for joining us for the fourth Indiana Jones movie. You can go back and listen to our first Indiana Jones review, which was Raiders of the Lost Ark. We have not reviewed the second or third Indiana Jones movie, because this season is screwing us up, Brad, in terms of how we review our series of films. What we're doing this season is we're looking at the highest grossing films from 1988 all the way up through 2019. So we're getting...
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer to the end here, Brad. Which I don't know if I would call that something to celebrate or if it's, not going out with a bang, but a whimper.
Yeah, I didn't even know that we were reviewing top grossing films, Bob.
You just show up and do what I tell you.
I'm still stuck on that. It makes sense now why every week I've progressed a year in, my in 2006, 7, 8. This is all, it's all coming together, my friend.
All news to you. Brad, we are, I guess we're like, what? We're 20 years in now, 21 episodes into this season. So from Rain Man to Crystal Skull, we have really run the gamut here. What's your impression of what was on America's mind for these 20 years that we've watched, Brad?
Oh, man. If I had to summarize it, I would say it's Russia and then America being awesome because America is awesome. Sure. And then fantasy.
Yep.
Jesus. And then more fantasy.
Yep. And then there was that one year that we all really liked Nuns. And that was it. You know, like it's like in the late 90s when swing came back for a hot second and you had like Zoot Suit Riot. It's like that, but with nuns.
Yeah. Yeah. 92, man. It's a great year.
All right, dude, let's get into talking about Crystal Skull, as I'm going to keep calling it, because I'm not referring to it by this full title. This is Assassination of Jesse James Lang. Okay, Brad, had you seen this movie before this watch through?
Yes, exactly one time, because I think that would have been the right amount of times to have seen this movie.
At the end of last week's episode, you did say that you'd seen it at least once and you didn't like it. And I was worried that you were going to watch it again and not like it again, because my guy, Brad G, can get a little bit, what's the word, Brad? Petulant with films that he does not like.
That is a strong take on how I interact with films I do not view favorably.
You don't find
Robert.
yourself to be even a little petty sometimes when you're grouchy about the movie?
I give movies honest scores that America deserves to hear.
That's true. It sounds like this one's not going to get a very high score from you yet again, Brad.
No, it's not. This movie sucks, bro.
I'm in a slightly different spot. I don't think this is what I would call a great film. I don't even think that it's
slightly sucks, America.
Yeah, it's meh. It's a pretty meh movie. I did think that the first 40-ish minutes of this movie were they moved like gangbusters. It was some of the fastest paced filmmaking I've ever seen Spielberg do, and it really hurdles you from one scene to the next. And then they get on a plane to go to Peru, and everything that happens after that gets progressively worse. So, Brad, if you don't mind, before we even jump into Brad Explains, I'm going to run this by you as a guy who clearly did not like the entirety of the movie. I did like part of it, and I would like for us to kind of let's spend the first part of the episode talking about the first part of the movie so we can say some positive things, or at least one of us can.
I was going to say we? That is quite the assumption there.
And then I will let your totally not petulant side take over in the second half. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah, but very
even keeled. Yeah.
Even keeled. Yeah. No, this is I'm ready, man.
Have you ever heard the phrase even keeled? Like has keeled ever come up when it's not even? Like has anybody said like that's real odd keeled right now?
This is probably completely wrong. The word that popped in my brain was being off kilter.
Yeah.
Which feels like it's an offshoot of
keel.
Even keeled, off kilter.
Okay.
I don't know if it is.
All right.
I could be completely guessing.
Well, with that sort
I've never heard keeled be talked about.
With that sort of knowledge base, it's time for us to get into our first segment of the day, which we call Brad Explains.
Brad's gonna give us the movie plot with only 60 seconds ticking on the clock. So let's go ahead and hear your take with this little segment that we call Brad Explains.
Brad Explains is the part of the podcast where Brad breaks down the plot of the film that he has just seen, often for the first time. This was Brad's second time with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which means it is nearer the top of his list on most rewatched films now. So, Brad, you have 1 minute to spoil this movie and go.
Papa, I don't want to explain this movie.
It's not that bad. Come on.
Oh, man. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a film, undoubtedly. It made money at the box office. Bob, I'm still amazed that we are watching this as the highest grossing film of this year.
Well,
this just a garbage year for movies?
We watched The Dark Knight already.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's good to hear. Here's the thing. Crystal Skull is about Indiana Jones getting kidnapped like 7 times by the Russians and forced to do their dirty business as they seek this telepathic crystal skull ability so that they can control the minds of their enemies. And they go to South America and they find aliens.
Boom. The end. Most importantly, I don't mean to immediately steer away, but you said dirty business, which is a phrase I've never heard. I've heard dirty work and I've heard like business or just like do their business.
Giving them the business.
But never do their dirty business. And it makes it sound like he became some sort of weird sex slave for the Russians. And I just want to say, folks, that is not what happens in this movie. It sounds like Brad may have actually found that to be more interesting than the movie that he got, though.
I mean, you wouldn't be Kate Blanchett's weird Russian accent.
No, absolutely not.
I know what you're into, Bob.
I am into Kate Blanchett. You know this about me. One of my
That's what I'm saying.
all-time movie crushes.
I think you're more into Kate Blanchett from The Aviator, if I had to guess.
I do like the
into.
Hepburnian version of Kate Blanchett. Yeah. Okay, so Brad, I want to start by asking you a question, and it has to do with Indiana Jones as a series. There's definitely been some ups and downs to this series. People, Raiders is considered one of the greatest films ever made, and then Temple of Doom has its followers, but is always considered a big step down, and then kind of a return to form with The Last Crusade. What do we get? A 20-year break almost before Crystal Skull comes out. Mm-hmm. And people say Crystal Skull ruined the series and blah, blah, blah. So we're dealing with a movie here that reputationally is kind of in the same vein as what we dealt with The Phantom Menace a few weeks back. Now, I think The Phantom Menace has been reclaimed in the years since, but for a long, long time, I mean, even you, Brad, as a fan of Star Wars, knows that it had a lot of obstacles to overcome to become the beloved film that it is now. And this is kind of similar. What I find to be interesting is Indiana Jones was always designed to be a throwback to stupid short serial films that they would show before movies, at a double bill in the 1950s, throwing all the way back to 1930s films. You get a lot of that with Raiders,
with characters with the names like Mutt Williams.
Yes. And so when you get to this movie, now we're set in the 1950s, and it's very clear that Spielberg is trying to throw back to those 1950s teeny bopper movies and parts of it, but also the cheesy science fiction films of the 50s. And I think that if you go into this movie understanding that it is clearly designed to be as cheesy as the films that it is ripping off or paying homage to, I don't think I had a bad time watching it. Whether or not it's a good movie is a different question. But I guess my question to you, Brad, is why do you think we accept the homage to certain films that Indiana Jones does, but that this movie doesn't work with the kind of films it's paying homage to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think for me, oh, you're going to love this analogy, Bob. Are you ready? So you talked about cheese a minute ago, and I agree with you. This movie has cheese galore. Mm-hmm. The problem with too much cheese in your personal diet or in your film is that it leads to straining. Everything ends up feeling forced.
Oh,
and I think that's I think that's the problem with this movie, Bob. It just feels forced. Like every actor was told to read their lines in the most stilted, awkward manner possible. The action scenes feel forced. The music doesn't, I don't know, inspire the same highs as it usually does. Yeah. There's just a lot that felt, and I don't know. Honestly, Bob, I think these might be the most negative things I say about the film. Like, it just didn't really work for me super well. There are individual moments that had some impetus and meaning and felt like it was going somewhere, but they all just kind of fizzled the more the characters talked. And I think that's the problem is not that it's cheesy. It's just that it's a little too much.
Would you say that, I keep thinking of like the word cutesy, like Spielberg's trying to be too cute with this movie in a lot of places. And I don't just mean cute like pandering, but I mean like he comes up with the most contrived ways to get his characters out of trouble. And that's always been a thing with Indiana Jones, but it seems like this time it's especially like winking at the camera about it. And he's trying to have his cake and eat it too a little bit. And yeah, I'm with you, man. Everything from the like CGI gophers at the beginning of the movie.
Dude, you know, find a real gopher. You're Steven freaking Spielberg. Like,
you can't get me a trained gopher on set here.
Yeah. Like, what's going on, man?
I don't so much mind the cutaways to the gophers because I think it does tip off like, oh, we're going to go to this kind of territory with this movie, you know? And it reminds me of the scene with the monkey brains in Temple of Doom where Kate Capshaw sees them and then falls over and faints. And it's like, It's so over the top. It's so goofy, so cheesy.
Yeah.
This movie definitely has a lot more in common in terms of its DNA with Temple of Doom. But what I found really interesting about it, Brad, is that in terms of the storyline, it's actually probably the most similar to Raiders, where you find out exactly what they're looking for really early in the movie, and the bad guys get their hands on it really early in the movie. And then you're just kind of like walking around either the desert in Raiders or the jungle here, fumbling the thing. Different people pick it up, and then at the end it gets cracked open and you see how it's used and bad things happen. But I spent I was going to say, I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out, why does this exact formula work so much better in Raiders than it does here?
It just feels... Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't just say, oh, it feels different, because like it's very clearly trying to do the same thing. I just think that there's diminishing returns this time. And a lot of people have... Go ahead, sorry.
That's the honest truth, Bob. There are diminishing returns on returning to the same well.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to compare it to something a little more modern, I would look at the Force Awakens, right? Yep. Episode 7. Like, I walked away from that movie going like, man, this is pretty solid. I'm curious to see where they go with the trilogy, but it felt like a remake of A New Hope. Mm-hmm. And you can only kind of get so much out of that, especially when, a few of your main actors are so much older than they used to be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at here with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Is that what it's called, Bob? Is that the full title?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, man, let's look at the roster here, starting from the top. Harrison Ford returns. And it's funny because, I just saw the most recent Indiana Jones that came out last year in the theater, and my guy is 111 years old now. And so to go back another 15, 16 years and watch this one, where he's already being commented on as being an old man, because he's like 65 years old, I think, when this movie comes out. But I'm like, wow, Harrison Ford looks good. He looks young. Look how sprightly he looks, Harrison Ford... Even at 65, it's kind of like the Clint Eastwood thing, where you're like, I get it. I get why people would still fall in love with you, Harrison Ford. He is an incredibly good-looking man. He still moves pretty well in this movie. I can see him doing a couple stunts in this movie. There's obviously some stuntmen where they're like showing the back of his head, and it's not Harrison Ford. But he's still moving around at a good clip in this movie, and I think that he brings every ounce of that Harrison Ford charm. They keep putting him in situations where it's like, oh, Harrison Ford is going to bail out this movie just by being Harrison Ford. And then it gets bogged down in the actual details of the movie again. And I feel like they keep getting away from just let Harrison Ford be funny and charming, because that's why we're here.
Yes. Yeah, I am with you on that. I think that Harrison, at select small moments throughout the movie, you can feel his sarcasm coming through, and it's perfect. Mm-hmm. And it kind of cuts against the grain of what the movie is going for, but in a way that makes me go, oh, I wish there was more of that and less of Shia LaBeouf and less of Cate Blanchett giving just a all-star Russian accent.
Oh my gosh. It is so good. So good.
Just so goods. So many goods.
I have to ask, okay, this is a really specific question, but...
Oh, I love really specific questions.
I mean, it just bothered me the whole movie. The way she says the word Jones.
Yes.
Because it's like, I can't tell if she maybe like studied real Russian and they do this weird long O thing, or if she's just slipping back into being British, but only in that word. Because she'll be like, you will come with us to Russia, Mr. Jones. It just becomes this weird, like, OU umlaut type sound every time she says it. And it drove me crazy the whole movie, Brad.
It's incredible. I'm here for it, man. The cheese on her Russian accent is what put the movie over the top. And yet, I think if you isolated it, it's like a thing of glory.
Here's my hot take. She's not cheesy enough in this movie. She needs to chew 10 times more scenery than she does. She comes in and she's got the like, I'm a badass with my tight-fitting clothes and my horrible-looking haircut. And she needs to be like either over the top, like sex pot, kind of like a what was the GoldenEye villain?
I was just, yep.
You know what I mean? Like she needs to be like that, or she
Iron
needs to
thighs.
be, yes, or she needs to be like a John Malkovich character. She needs to be one of the two. And she has a couple moments where, like,
now I just want to see that her role recast, still as a woman,
but just John Malkovich,
but played by
same,
John
like the wig and
Malkovich.
everything. Yeah.
Yes.
She has a moment in the movie where Harrison Ford says something to her like, you win or something. And she goes, nah, I usually do. And I'm like, oh, see, we need more of those. We need more of like Bond villain vibes from you. And I think she's trying to be over the top, but also play her role like she's taking it seriously. And it's once again, like, you can't have it both ways, Kate. You got to choose one. And I think that the movie is so ridiculous and cheesy that it needed her to be a little bit more like Nicolas Cage level over the top.
Yeah, maybe that would have, been it's kind of like a joke that gets old, but then it comes back around. It's funny again. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe this just needed that much more cheese in its life to push you from straining to just very loose
to the floodgates opening. Yeah.
Just moving.
To just straight Velveeta, baby. Okay, we're jumping all over the place, but I want to talk about Shia LaBeouf because we obviously talked about him last week with Transformers. You didn't really like his character there, and I didn't think he was really perfectly cast for that movie. He has gotten a lot of crap for his role as Mutt in this movie. I think that, again, it reminds me of the kind of Jar Jar level hate, where it doesn't really make sense why people hate him so much. I think most people just pushed back on the fact that we tried to just insert a kid into Indiana Jones's life, and that they were toying with the audience of like will he take on the mantle? Will he not take on the mantle? I got to be honest with you.
Spoiler alert, he doesn't.
He does not. They snatched that hat back real quick at the end of the movie, which I thought was a funny touch. I really liked that ending. But separated from the film by 16 years, I guess I just don't understand it. I think that, first of all, I think Shia LaBeouf's really good in this movie. And I also don't mind his character. I do think that there are a number of scenes where the I'm griping with my dad thing goes on way too long.
Yes.
But that's more of a writing issue. And I don't think that I thought they had great chemistry. I thought they played off each other well. And like overall, I found him to be a really great addition to the movie.
I think that after these 2 weeks, I find myself in a place similar with like a Nicolas Cage where it's like, great actor, but who the heck is his agent? Because I feel like he is a really sincere, earnest actor, at least at this stage of his career. And I'm with you, Bob. I actually really like Shia LaBeouf after watching him 2 weeks in a row. I think he's a very honest actor. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is the script has him swinging through the friggin' jungle like on vines with like 80 monkeys. Like,
that's another moment though, Brad, where, I've been in movies like that where you go, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they had this moment.
You've been acting in movies
I've
like
been
that.
in the movie, yeah. And I've been like,
wow.
Oh my gosh, what am I doing with these monkeys? But then again, like, you hear the fable of the movie over the years, and it's like, that's the movie where they swing with monkeys. That's the movie where Jar Jar Binks does this. And then you watch it and you're like, wait, that's the thing that got people that, like, yes, it's
like
bad.
8 seconds long.
It's really bad. It's terrible. But like in the grand scheme of the movie, like, okay, I feel like I can overlook this a little bit. Yeah. It's definitely Spielberg overstepping in the cutesy department.
Yeah.
But again, like
the opposite.
Sorry.
You get the opposite in a lot of movies too. Like I just watched Joker recently, and I know that there's the famous scene when he's like dancing his way down the stairs. And I got to it and I was kind of like, that's it? That's what everybody lost their mind over?
Also, you think that scene's coming and it's going to be like this really emotional moment or like a moment that's like disturbing. But then you realize that they're playing the Gary Glitter song over the background.
Yep.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. Of all the songs that I could have imagined in my mind he was dancing to, that would not be the one.
No, not at all. I think about like going to watch the Cavs as a child in the 90s when I hear that song.
Maybe that's where he was going, and then he just got derailed a little bit.
Yeah, no big deal.
All right, Indiana Jones. Other people in this movie. We've talked about Cate Blanchett. We've talked about Shia LaBeouf and Harrison Ford. You've got Ray Winstone making an appearance, not as Mr. Gopher this week, but as Indy's old sidekick. What's his name? And he's fine. It's like your classic Indiana Jones. I used to know you, and now I'm double crossing you kind of character.
Triple crossing.
Yes, but what turned out to be single crossing.
Dude, it's moments like that where, like, Harrison Ford, like, holds his hands up and starts, like, with his fingers counting out how many times he's betrayed somebody. And the way he does it just feels awkward and weird. And I'm like, I don't know what you're going for here. I saw the joke that you were about to make, like, 18 seconds before you made it. Like, it's not good writing.
I know. And is there anybody else you want to talk about in the cast? Because I do want to kind of focus on the first part of the movie that I liked, but I feel like the farther down the cast list I get, the more these people show up in the back part of the movie and the more I don't like them. Like John Hurt, one of our great actors who just has an absolute nothing burger of a performance here. It's really tragic, but are you okay with like reserving those opinions until we get to that part of the movie?
Yeah, that's fine. I have to comment. At the start of the film, like, he shows up for all of 0.7 seconds. There's an actor named Pasha D. Lichnikov who just runs in front of the camera as a Russian soldier number 17. And I saw him and I was like, I don't know what he's from, but I recognize him. He is from something. And I thought he was going to be like, you know, like one of the C tier characters in the film, like the Russian soldier that Indy keeps fighting. And then he never appeared again. And I was a little sad because I recognized him and I wanted to be rewarded for that.
That's one of Brad's favorite performances in this film. Him and the gopher.
It was.
Yeah.
Dude, he was really good. He ran across the screen and yelled something in Russian and that was it.
Was it believable? Yeah.
It was so good.
I love the first 25-ish minutes of this movie, Brad. Like, love it. I was having the time of my life. This movie starts off with an empty expanse of highway. We're in the middle of nowhere, and you get these teenagers out for a joyride in their hot rod, and they start racing against a military convoy. And it's this stupid, unnecessary scene where Spielberg's like, look at all the shit I can do with a camera. And you have one of the coolest shots I've ever seen in a Spielberg movie, where it starts from directly outside the car, and you're looking basically like adjacent to the back seat into the side mirror, and you see the driver who's looking behind him. And then the camera swings into the car, and from inside the car, it's still pointed at the mirror, and you see the people coming up behind them. And to this day, I have no idea how they pulled off that shot, but there is just shot after shot after shot in this opening 40-ish minutes where it's like you can tell Spielberg storyboarded everything, and every single shot is so perfectly composed and so technically brilliant, and it's lit so well that I'm like, I'm going to come into this episode like, you guys are missing out on a masterpiece. And Brad, like I said, they get to the point where they go to Peru, and then Spielberg's like, now everything's going to be made by a computer. And the movie goes so far downhill. But I don't know what it is about that first third of the film. It was like masterfully made movie making. And like, regardless of what you think of the script of this movie, I guess I'm wondering, did you notice the craft, at least in the early part of this movie?
Oh, everything in me just wants to piss you off and just go, nah. But I will say the first time watching this through, because you had me go back and rewatch the first 10 minutes to see if it stood up to your evaluation. And I without that being in my brain, I didn't notice it the first time through. Like the opening scene I thought was well done. I think that it was really beautiful. The shots that you get of the Nevada wilderness and the cars driving and all of that was interesting. To me, the teenage car just drove me nuts a little bit. Like, I don't know if people just drove differently back then, but getting run off the road onto the side into the desert wouldn't lead me to like jump onto the road and fly up ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
It just felt like a weird.
Again, like I do think there's a difference between like, is this working on a story level, and is Spielberg just like having a field day being the best person to ever use a camera?
Sure.
And I think that if you're watching the movie just for like, you know, what most people would be, which is like a surface level, I just want to be entertained. Like, there's entertaining parts to it, but it's also absolutely baffling, some of the things that happen in this movie. I'm the first person to say that. I just think that this time through, and maybe it's the guy who's been so beaten down by MCU movies and even the most recent indie movie, which I think is a better movie than this, but it just doesn't have the craftsmanship. There's so many shots in this movie where if you're just watching it, you would swear, all right, this guy said something, then they cut to this person, and then they're cutting back, and now, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, no, hit pause, go back 10 seconds and watch that shot again. And you realize it was all a oneer. Spielberg just has the camera here, and the camera pulls back a little bit to reveal a second person, and then it pushes in on that, and then they pull back, and now it's a 2-shot. And it's just, every shot is so meticulously planned that I found myself just like giddy from watching this dude be like, yeah, this movie's shitty, but watch what I can do with it. It's like he almost pulled it off too, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed the Nuketown scene where it's following Harrison around this town that has been built to see what happens when an American town gets hit by a nuclear bomb. Mm-hmm. And like that scene just was well done. And it felt like a part of the movie where there was no CGI. It slowed down a little bit. It let Harrison be almost like a fugitive. What's the 80s movie that you don't like?
I don't know.
With
Back
Harrison.
to the Future? Oh, with Harrison.
The cybernetic people.
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. It feels like a Blade Runner fugitive Harrison, like wandering around this abandoned town and not knowing what to do next. And then the moment of panic on his face is you realize they're about to test a nuclear bomb. I have to find a solution. Like, those are the moments with Harrison that I'm like, oh, this is the Harrison Ford I know and love. And I think Spielberg is using to his maximum. And then he puts him in a CGI refrigerator and shoots him, 18 football fields away. And it's another one of those famously bad scenes.
Yeah. And that's the one that I'm like, I don't know that you actually recover from this one. And it happens like 20 minutes into the movie. And it's just so unnecessary. It has nothing to do with the plot of the movie. The funny thing, though, too, is like, from a filmmaking standpoint, I can see exactly why they did it. I can, like, for Spielberg, Indiana Jones is his entry point into the iconography of America, and America of certain eras. Like, you get Harrison Ford literally bumping into Hitler in the third Indiana Jones movie. He's battling Nazis all through these movies. And now it's like, we're going to bring him into the nuclear age. We're going to bring him into the Cold War. Spielberg's probably sitting there with George Lucas like, I have an idea for a shot. I don't know how we get there, but it's Harrison Ford walking up a hill, and over the crest of the hill, it's just a silhouette of Indiana Jones with a nuclear explosion behind him.
Yep.
That's the iconography that will make people wonder, like, how do we bring Indiana Jones into the Cold War era? Let's build a scene around that. And I know, like, if I know anything, Brad, I know that they worked backwards from that shot, because it's one of the coolest shots I've ever seen, but nothing makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I respect the attempt, Spielberg, but what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, you've storyboarded with Steve before. Yeah. Like, it makes sense with what you know of him.
I already told you I've swung with monkeys on set, so what would make you doubt me now, Brad?
That sounds like you're doing something dirty on your own, Bob.
Dirty business, as we say. Okay, before we go to break, Brad, I do want to call out just a couple other things about the first part of this movie. I really like having Jim Broadbent show up as the dean of the school.
Oh, yeah.
I like the introduction of Shia LaBeouf and them starting a fight between, like, the socias and the jocks or the bikers in that, like, soda shop. I thought that was great. And then it goes right into shake, rattle, and roll. It's a great needle drop. And then you get this awesome chase scene with a motorcycle and these KGB guys chasing them through the college campus. It gets ridiculous. They go into the library. I'm having a blast. Like, this movie is cheesy as hell, and I'm loving it. And I guess, once again, I'm wondering, like, what was the turning point for you, Brad, where your internal, movie watching bowels started to get stopped up with the cheese? Because for me, the cheese was working until the cheese was all CGI. But did it stop working before that for you?
It was the Gophers, man.
What's at the 2-minute mark?
The freaking gopher pops out of the ground and is just some of the worst CGI. Like, just hire Pixar to make that gopher. It would have been incredible. Like,
it's crazy how bad some of the CGI is in this movie, dude.
Oh, and it was from that moment on that I just really didn't jive with this movie. But
Brad, you know that's the first shot of the whole movie, right? Like, it's the Paramount logo, and it fades into the molehill, and then the mole pops up out of it, and that's it.
Yes, 100%. I am very well aware of that. Okay. I think, though, I'm with you. Everything up until the iconic, red line traveling to South America interlude, everything up until that point is, like, well done enough that I'm enjoying the film outside of the forced acting. Once they head to South America, that's where the movie really, really does take a downturn for me.
And that's where we're going to stop right here, Brad. Let's try some whiskey, and then we'll come back and commiserate a little bit. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so today we're trying something a little bit different, Brad, both in terms of...
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
The product we're trying and how we're going to talk about it. We are sampling something from friend of show Wes, who's been giving us tons and tons of whiskey to review lately. And he gave us a sample of Watershed Distillery's bourbon finished in Pinot Noir casks. Now, when we first received this, we said, oh boy, we love ourselves some wine-finished casks. And we love Watershed for the most part. We're pretty big fans of what they're doing in Columbus. It is a craft distillery with a pretty huge reputation at this point, especially in terms of representing the state of Ohio. However, what we've come to find out is that this is not just a limited release from Watershed. It is so hyper limited that I can't really find any information about it. I'm starting to wonder if this was just like a distillery only gift shop release or something, because I see no pricing information. I see no mash bill information. I know that Watershed has worked with 4-grain mash bills in the past, but their regular mash bill is not. But I can't tell exactly what we're drinking today, Brad. And so I think, let's give our impressions here, but I think we might just want to use this kind of as a jumping off point to talk a little bit about the craft whiskey scene in America. And I think this sort of epidemic now of finished bottles, because that's kind of what we're doing here today.
Yeah, 100%. I think that so many craft distilleries are working their way into, hey, we're unique because of this territory. And I think it works really well for some of them and not quite as well for others. Mm-hmm. Like the reason Angel's Envy is still famous isn't because they make really good finished whiskeys. It's because they were the first ones to make to make finished whiskeys. And so I think that every craft distiller is trying to find their unique voice in a oversaturated market. Can I get an amen, Bob?
Yeah, dude. I don't want to be the doomsayer that I clearly am going to be, but like, I'm really getting sick of the bourbon industry assuring us that there's not a bourbon bubble happening. And even like bourbon influencers that I am friends with are, I think, really optimistic that this will continue, but I just don't know how it can. The way that these distilleries are expanding, the $100 million, $500 million expansions we're seeing, I just don't know how sustainable this can be. And so I think you're starting to see it a little bit in this explosion of product expansion, product line expansion, and they're doing it by finishing their same product in 85 different kinds of casks, some of them good, some of them bad. Brad, the one we have in front of us here, I guess let's just go ahead and dive in because it's clearly standing in as a representative for all finished barrels ever right now, which is probably not fair to it.
This has gone way darker than I thought it would for our whiskey segment.
Well, I mean, look, it's a harmless thing that Watershed is doing here, but I also what am I to do with this? If it's good, great, they don't sell it anymore, and if it's bad, it's like, well, now I know why they didn't sell it. You know what I mean?
I think I do, Bob.
Okay, we're diving in. On the nose of this Watershed bourbon, Brad, this is incredibly young smelling, incredibly youthful. A lot of times you'll hear that there's a specific note on craft whiskey that needs to be separated from youth. And I don't know if that's exactly what's going on here, but I smell a lot of just like straight raw grain. And it's not even corn. It's like some secondary grain. It almost smells like raw oats to me, but like really sour and unaged. And I'm a little bit nervous for where we're going to go from here, Brad. I'm only going to give this 4.5 on the nose.
4.5?
Yeah, dude, this is not good.
Wow.
Yeah,
I am in a very different place from you, Bob. Wow.
In the spirit of being honest about our scores today, which I know you will at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
I would normally just say who cares? This is a 5.5 at least. But I mean, if I'm being frank with you, I think this is like a 4.5 nose, dude.
Dude, I luckily still have a little bit of this poured out because I'm nosing it right now again because that is
low.
Yeah, that's really low. I am at a 7.5, Bob.
Woo!
I think that you get grapes, you get wood shavings, there's vanilla, there's brown sugar. I don't think it's a spectacular nose. It's not blowing me out of the water, but it's not a 4.5 nose.
Are you picking up on the youth?
Honestly, no.
Oh, man.
I think this is...
It's really yeasty.
Well, I know
also
that this
really
is from
grainy.
2020, 2021, and at that point, they were already using their 4-year bourbon. And, 4-year bourbon isn't old by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not youthful either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think 4 years is where you're starting to hit your stride with a bourbon. So to me, I remember old Woodshed. I remember
old Woodshed whiskey.
We should start old Woodshed whiskey.
When we started this podcast, they were doing a 4-grain recipe that had spelt in it. Do you remember that?
Yes, and it was that's what I was about to say. It was
that might be this.
No, that is not this.
Do you have assurances that this is the 4-year whiskey? I can't find anything about it. Maybe when they upped the age statement, they were like, let's get rid of the old product, throw it in some wine barrels, and let's give it out in the gift shop.
That could be true, Bob, but I doubt it. Because I'm not getting any of that youth on this.
Well, I am, and I'm right. So let's take a sip here, Brad. I'll let you go first this time as I give it my first sip.
Yeah, I think that the grape comes through strong. For me, it turns into a grape soda type of taste. The preeminent note that I always get on Watershed comes through here in spades. It is called balsa wood. I don't know what it is about Watershed products, but almost every single one I've ever had tastes a little bit like balsa wood. It's almost like a bit of a funk, if you will. But other than that, I get some vanilla bean. I get a little bit of that brown sugar caramel coming through. I think it's a pretty decent pour of whiskey. I came down to a 7 out of 10 here.
I actually don't mind this on the palate. And I think that as it's been opening up a little bit, or I don't know if I'm just getting used to the nose or I'm starting to pick up more notes here, but it had a little bit of that cherry cola note that I get sometimes on wheated bourbons. When I sipped it, Brad, I don't get a really sweet grape, but there's definitely some grape skin in there. And I think for me, I was really surprised at how there's a note of saline to this that I wasn't expecting. It's a little bit salty. And I actually really liked that. It kind of balanced things out a little bit. There's a ton of spiciness and kind of prickliness on your palate here. It's marked on my sample bottle as only being 94 proof. This drink's like a 108, 110 proof whiskey. It's definitely got some bite to it, and I really like that. I don't know that I would have necessarily pegged this as being a finished bourbon. unless you had told me. But I'm kind of okay with that. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 on the palate.
When I got into the finish is where the balsa of it all kind of took over. Not terribly so, as has been the case with their regular offering. I really think that the Pinot Noir finish evens this out really beautifully. I'm sitting at a 6.5 on the finish, Bob.
Yeah, I think I'm going to still be at a 7 here. I think there's some really nice notes of like butterscotch on this. The saline is there. It's pretty like oily and kind of viscous. I really like that as well. Very different from what I got on the nose. Once again, I just don't really know. Maybe it's the Pinot Noir that's giving it that kind of making it seem like it's a little bit salty, but that's not really, that's not what Pinot Noir tastes like. But it must be bringing out some notes here. Unfortunately, I just don't get a lot of that grape character, and I think that's really where this suffers for me. So I'll give it a 7 on the finish, and on balance, I think I am going to ding it and just give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's okay balanced. It definitely has some issues. I think the real issue is when you get to value here, Bob. Now, we don't have the exact price of what this cost when it was being sold, but I've lived in the Columbus area long enough to know that their special expressions, their special releases usually are in the $60 to $90 range. So I don't know if we want to call it like $75, $80 for this. But I just, if I'm looking at spending $70 to $80 on a bottle of whiskey, I don't think this is a great value, Bob.
Yeah, man. And I mean, if I could be honest here, our relationship with Watershed has been kind of up and down over the years as well. I feel like we keep losing contact with them, and we really want to support Ohio distilleries. Watershed is one that's like, we want to support you, but like you're hard to get in touch with. And so Watershed, I'm really sorry that we don't have the information on this bottle that might be necessary for us to give this a more appropriate score. But based solely on what we drank and what this probably would cost as a special, distillery only release, Brad, I'm with you, man. This is just not really up to snuff. I think that their stuff has gotten better over the years, and I'm really excited for the product that former master distiller Aaron Harris put down to start coming out on shelves, because we tried some of that White Dog and it was really, really good.
Yeah.
This is not that. So I'm just going to give it a 4.5 again on value. And that brings me out to only a 29 out of 50, Brad.
Yeah, I gave it a 5 out of 10 on value, so I'm in a pretty similar place to you, Bob. I'm coming to a 32.5 out of 50. A decent score, but not one where I'm going to recommend it, mostly because of the price. I think that what's actually in the bottle is decent.
All right, so that takes us to a 61.5 out of 100, or a 30.75 out of 50. I just don't think this is really anything to write home about, Brad. I'm super grateful to Wes for giving us this one-off whiskey. But I think, Brad, this is kind of emblematic of what we're seeing in the craft distillery world. I don't want to say that this smells like desperation, but I think as these craft distillers try to find their place in the market, they keep doing things like this, and they're just not always successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anything, Bob, this episode, at least the whiskey portion, has become a weird commentary on the bourbon bubble. Mm-hmm. And I do kind of wonder how craft distillers are going to stay afloat as, like, the return to the mean happens and people go back to just buying the big brands.
Yeah. There is an impending nuclear explosion in the world of bourbon. Will they find the lead-lined refrigerator to make it through? That's the question here, Brad.
What will be the CGI gophers that get annihilated?
All right, man, let's get back into talking about Indiana Jones. What do you say?
Let's get to it. All right, everybody, that was Watershed Pinot Noir finish, a whiskey that we are done talking about.
Yes, we are.
You know what we're not done talking about, Bob?
Is it 2 facts and a falsehood?
Canada's favorite segment, 2 facts and a falsehood.
Brad is gonna try to stump you, Bob. 2 are right and 1 is wrong. 2 facts and a falsehood.
Two Facts and a Falsehood is the part of the show where Brad presents me with 3 items as fact about the making of this movie, one of which is a complete lie. Brad, I am sitting at 13-7 on the season. I have done not one bit of research on this movie. I've probably said some wildly inaccurate things in the process, but that means that bodes well for you because I have not been reading up on this movie at all.
I don't blame you at all, Bob. That is probably a good decision on your use of time.
All right, man. Hit me with your 2 facts and a falsehood.
Fact number 1, the girl who punches Mutt Williams. I almost called him Matt. That would be way too normal.
Matt Williams. The blandest name ever.
Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf, in the diner scene is Sasha Spielberg, daughter of director Steven Spielberg and Kate Capshaw. Fact number 2, due to new safety rules around the use of props deemed dangerous on set, Indy's whip was actually a CGI replica in several scenes of the movie, a move which was met with ridicule by Harrison Ford. Fact number 3, the Akator throne room near the end of the film keeps up an Indiana Jones tradition by having C-3PO and R2-D2 etched into one of the yellow tiles, and E.T., the extraterrestrial, Bob, I don't know if you've heard of him, etched into another.
Number 3 sounds true, and if it's not, I don't care. That just sounds like a fun little Easter egg. Number 2 also sounds true. My boy Harrison would not stand for CGI. Number 1, I don't really know or really care. Sasha Spielberg is in fact Steven Spielberg's daughter. I don't know if that was her. I don't know that you would know enough about Sasha Spielberg to make it up, though, so I'm a little suspicious that that might be true. My gut is telling me number 2 is one that you would write.
Where are you going with this, Bob?
Is it 1 or is it 2?
Is it 1 or is it 2 now?
Number 1 is the falsehood, but I don't feel good about it.
You shouldn't, because you're wrong.
No! Was it 2?
Yeah, it was 2.
Ah, damn it. I hate when that happens. Yeah, I should have known you didn't know anything about Sasha Spielberg.
Yep.
All right. Well,
every once in a while, I do some research to write a really good falsehood. This was not one of those
today
weeks.
is not that day. Yeah.
Nope. I've been busy, bro.
So I am at 13-8 on the season, and Harrison Ford's whip apparently real in all scenes.
Yes, every single one.
Wow.
I did somewhat steal this from the IMDb page. There were new safety rules, and they did want to use a CGI prop for every single whip scene. And Harrison Ford literally was like, "Get the F out of here. I'm using a real whip." And so every single whip in the whole movie is 100% real.
Okay. Thank you for authenticating the, veracity of the whips here. All right, Brad.
No problem, man.
Let us dive back into this movie. I don't have too much more to say because everything after Peru is a negative from me. I just think that this thing really devolves into talking in circles, I think, is like the biggest thing I can really criticize this for. We know exactly what the skull is used for. The scene where she hypnotizes him with it is like a preposterous scene, but I think it's really well done. There's actually like some stakes involved. It's a little bit suspenseful. They're trying to escape. You can't tell if Ray Winstone is the bad guy, but like the mythos of the skull is established. We know everything we need to know. And then it feels like the characters just continually get stupider throughout the movie. And I don't even mean with like the decisions they make, but they're like, they get all the way into a cave that is shaped like the alien's head. And they're like, what do you think this is for? I don't know. How do we get in this door? I don't know. Maybe let's try holding the skull up to it. It's like, no shit. Like the skull has pointed you everywhere. What's wrong with you people? They're continually surprised by things that have already been explained 45 minutes earlier in the movie. And it's like infuriating by the time you get to the end of it. This movie is only 2 hours and 2 minutes long, Brad. And I could have sworn it was like at least 2:28. Like it just feels so repetitive by the time you actually get to the conclusion of this movie.
Bob, I love when you get to really enjoy a film, But man, when you really are annoyed with a movie, it's a
thing of beauty, isn't it?
It is a thing of beauty. I love when you get annoyed by movies.
I think I was just so mad because it undercuts what had made the first part of the movie so good. There was so much buildup. And like, before you really find out what the hell's going on in the first part of the movie, it's like chase after chase after chase. And I could see how for someone like you who didn't like the movie, even that seemed repetitive. But for me, it was like the stakes keep getting upped here. Let's find out what's going on. It reminded me of like when we talked about The Matrix, and I was like, I could see how somebody could check out before the 45-minute mark of The Matrix because you don't get anything explained to you till then. But when it works, it's because the stakes keep getting upped. And then the last 2/3 of the movie, it's like the stakes have been at their highest, and now everything seems like resolution when it's really not. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like the most suspenseful, most impactful parts of this movie are behind us. And so when we get to meet actual aliens at the end of the movie, it's just like, oh, okay, cool.
Meh.
Yeah.
And you also don't get any interactions with them. Like, dude, this movie sucks. It's just so frustrating because I think that they could have gone somewhere with this. And I remember when it came out, there was a lot of people who were like, oh, the Indiana Jones series is about Nazis and about like religious artifacts. And that's what makes an Indiana Jones movie. And I don't actually think that that's the case. I kind of watched for that in this movie. And I think that if you fully take out the Russians in this film and replace them with Nazis, almost in like a Captain America sense, I don't know, man. I don't think it changes what happens in the film. And what happens in the film just isn't intriguing enough for me to care.
No.
And I don't know. I was even thinking about, you were talking about this being a repeat of Raiders. I think one of the few problems with Raiders that people have pointed out that I kind of agree with is very true about this movie as well. If Indiana Jones does nothing, if he never gets involved, all of the same things happen. Like, they find their way
to learn a lesson, Maybe the real Skull is the friends we made along the way.
Oh, man, I feel so much better about this movie now, Bob.
9 out of 10. All right, Brad.
I don't want to go that far.
If we've said everything we need to say about the movie, I don't think it sucks, but I'm not far away from that. Let's get into Let's Make It a Double.
We're near the end of the episode, so thanks for listening to the Film and Whiskey Show. Let's pair another film with this one, even if it's a struggle. It's our final segment of the day, now let's make it a double.
Let's Make It a Double is the part of the show where we pick a movie to pair up with this one to make the perfect double feature. Brad, I'm going to be really boring, and I'm going to just pair it with the most recent Indiana Jones movie, which is called Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which is a significantly better title than this title. And I actually think it's a better movie, too. People just did not go see this movie in theaters last year. It's a ton of fun. It's not directed by Spielberg, and you can tell. And I think that if you could Frankenstein together the craftsmanship of this movie with the story, pacing, script of this most recent one, you'd have a really damn good Indiana Jones movie. But as it is, it feels like two halves that are missing each other. And I think it would make a really fun evening, if not a frustrating one, because neither of these seem like a complete indie film. But you can see how the equation works better, I think, when you isolate both sides of it like that. So that's my Let's Make It a Double.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good pick, Bob.
Did you see the most recent one, Brad?
Have not seen The Dial of Destiny,
okay.
No.
You should watch it. It's actually it's pretty good, man.
I have to ask, is The Dial of Destiny like an oven timer dial from like the 80s?
Actually, it's about the invention of the Easy Bake Oven.
Oh.
Yeah. And
that's
then
a movie
at the end of the movie, you think Harrison Ford is inside of this like deep dark cave, and then it zooms out and you find you're just inside of a cosmic Easy Bake Oven. It's like the end of The Grinch that way.
Yeah,
really meta stuff.
It.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that, Bob. I am in for that movie. For me, I don't know if I really have a good 2 facts and a falsehood.
Nope. It's called Let's Make It a Double.
Yeah, let's make it a double. Man, I'm over this episode.
Clearly.
How about we pair it with, I feel like I'm throwing a dart at a dartboard here. I don't know. How about Tomb Raider from 2018?
Oh, I have not seen it. The Alicia Vikander one?
Yeah, I've never seen it either.
I do like Alicia Vikander. Another celebrity crush of mine.
I don't know Alicia Vikander.
An Academy Award-winning actress. All right, Tomb Raider is Brad's pick, and mine is The Dial of Destiny. Brad, let's give this movie some scores. Now you know how I feel, man, about The Phantom Menace. This is your Phantom Menace, Brad.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You asked this question really early in the episode, and I didn't fully answer it. Like, where does the Indiana Jones series stand in the history of movie series, of movie, IP? I actually don't think that Indiana Jones ranks that highly for me personally. Like,
nor does it for most people of our generation. I feel like there was enough of a gap, from Return of the Jedi to Phantom Menace is a 16-year gap. From Last Crusade to this movie is a 19-year gap. And so there's a little bit longer of a gap, but also like, I don't know, there's just something about Star Wars appealing, especially to kids, that it kind of gets its hooks into you really young. I've thought about this a lot, Brad, because I think for me, when Raiders or when Indiana Jones is clicking, I find it to be more purely enjoyable than the world of Star Wars. And that's just me. But I mean, I would never argue that the ups and downs of this series are anything compared to Star Wars. Like, I just think that whether I like Star Wars or not, it's a more consistent product, at least until you get to the sequels. But
yes,
but the Indiana Jones movies are always kind of like great, meh, pretty good, meh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of bounces back and forth, which is unfortunate because I think that with some more consistent scripts, this really could have been Spielberg's, Star Wars type saga. And it just falls a little bit short. And I think because of that, people just haven't embraced it through generations the way they have with Star Wars.
I think you summed it up perfectly, Bob. I'm 100% with you. I think Indiana Jones is fun, but outside of Raiders of the Lost Ark, none of the movies are good enough to really warrant.
Oh, Last Crusade's really good, dude.
I honestly haven't seen it since I was a teenager.
Friggin' Sean Connery, man.
Yeah, I know.
Indiana, let it go. Oh, it's so good.
He's in this one too. There's a picture of him.
Yeah, there sure is. First dad dies, then this guy dies. He just gestures to both pictures. Brad, what's your final score, man?
What's my final score? 5 out of 10. Yeah.
I want to give it a 6 because I feel like the first half, the first 45 minutes were a legit 8.5 to 9 for me. The last 2/3 I was on my phone through. So let's be real here. I watched this movie for the first time about a year ago. So I remembered the whole thing and I felt like I could be on my phone, but also the movie put me in a state where I felt like I needed to be on my phone. And that is not a good sign. That means that this is in 4 out of 10 territory for the second half. I'm just going to give it a 5.5, Brad. I think that's fair for this movie. If you're giving it a 5, I'm a little bit higher than you. It's unfortunate that it could not sustain the energy of that first part, but it really, really falters at the 40-ish minute mark.
Yeah, 100%, man. I want this movie to be good. I started this episode by saying director Steven Spielberg and star Harrison Ford.
Yes.
And I feel like that is quite the epic pairing.
Can I give a really quick, I've been workshopping this theory and it's not fully formed. It'll come out in a future episode. But this movie really made me realize that I think Spielberg is like the LeBron James of famous filmmakers.
Ooh.
Because, the argument to make LeBron the GOAT, you do have to do some finessing of the stats and you have to downplay some stuff Jordan has done. But you also have to reckon with whether you agree with LeBron's move to Miami and his sort of sometimes petulant behavior in terms of getting what he wants and roster construction, whether you agree with that or not, you have to deal with the fact that he has spearheaded a particular movement in the NBA, a bent toward this player empowerment thing and building super teams. And a lot of what people don't like about the NBA can be directly traced back to LeBron. Like, as the world's biggest LeBron fan, the dude comes with baggage when he's on your team, and you just have to roll with it because he's that good. And I think Spielberg's kind of like that. Spielberg might be my favorite movie maker in history. I think he's also kind of directly responsible for the, like, nostalgia baiting sequelization of everything that has led us to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where everything is just merchandise and everything is just a product. Like, between Lucas and Spielberg, they're the guys that got us here, man. And you got to take the bad with the good. You can't have Schindler's List and Jurassic Park and stuff without also acknowledging this is the guy who made Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you know?
Yeah. Dude, you're just firing on all cylinders.
I'm feeling it, man.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is Spielberg
you.
might be the GOAT, but he definitely comes with his own form of baggage, especially when I see his name slapped on Transformers at the end of the movie. I'm like, what the hell, Steve? What are you doing, man?
Oh, yeah, Transformers, man. Once again, if it was just one movie, I think I'd be more okay with it than I am.
Yep, but it's like 7 now.
How did they make 7 Transformers?
The fact
movies,
that we
Bob?
haven't gotten a Fast and Furious Transformers mashup, like, that's how that series should end, is Vin Diesel driving a Transformer.
Yeah, that's a good call.
All right, man, let's get out of here. Next week, folks, we are watching the Pixar movie Up. We're actually doing back-to-back Pixars, Up and Toy Story 3. I am really excited to get into Pixarville, Brad, because we haven't really done animated movies in a while outside of Shrek. And God, do I not want to talk about that anymore. So we'll dive into Up next week. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.